He says he discovered libertarian tendencies at the age of 6 when he kicked a nurse in the face. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's my definition of libertarian.
It was nurse reaction.
Non-coercion, right?
Now he tends more towards classical liberalism. He started his first business at 7 and was bankrupt within 3 days. He's been mostly self-employed since and no burden to the taxpayer until now. He studied chemical engineering and other things. He can dance, I'll vouch for that. Fly a plane. Can't vouch for that, he says landings are still a problem.
I can vouch for that, I've been up in a plane with it.
Okay, good. Ron's been imprisoned and in no particular order dabbled in drugs, politics, JSE listings, fish farming, parenting and academia, the occult, Judaism, atheism and marriage. Like many, he is a somewhat disgruntled client of Standard Bank for the past 29 years. His agreement with Standard Bank is that they won't compete with the state in harming people, and Ron won't print 9 times more money than he has in his fractional reserve piggy bank. Standard Bank breached the agreement in June, and then again in August 2015, hence his presentation today. And his, I'm not going to read it out, it's case blah blah blah, State versus Standard Bank of South Africa. Ron's motto is there is no such thing as failure, only feedback, which has been my motto also for a very long time. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks, Francis. I've got it. Okay, right. Yeah. Is this your computer?
Okay. Feel free to mingle among yourselves.
Okay. Good. Morning, everybody, and Francis, thank you for that kind introduction. It's an absolute happiness to be here on the 30th Libsen and to see all the original faces from 25 years ago. There's quite a few here today, and to see us here in different times, a different century, and different political dispensations. So, who here, by a show of hands, has been affected by FICA?
FICA?
Negatively.
Oh, negatively, sorry. Then I have
So, it's pretty much everybody. But before I get onto that, I just wanted to announce that following last night's contention that everyone from the Eastern Cape does not own a pair of long pants. We tend to go to funerals, weddings and banquets in short pants and slip-slops. You'll see that both Trevor and I have actually worn long pants today, even though they're jeans. And as importantly, you'll notice my golf shirt. This is soon to be a collector's item if Rhodes Must Go has its way. There's a few left in Grahamstown if you want to get hold of one. This is a Rhodes University official golf shirt, and they should be worth a lot, assuming the name has changed and you want to take a future position on it. I'm not particularly popular at Rhodes. I can guarantee you I will never get a permanent post there. Mostly because of my leanings towards classical liberalism, whereas Rhodes, if you've attended or have children who've attended, will find that it's very much a leftist, liberal very politically correct university. So I do challenge the students, and in fact have told them that Rhodes University was not named after Cecil John Rhodes. In fact, it was built 5 or 6 years after he passed away. In fact, it was named after the Greek island of Rhodes in ancient Greece. It was a center of learning, of philosophy, of great achievement, and it was an apt name to call Rhodes after the island rather than the language who didn't actually directly know about it or have anything to do with the construction except for the fact that his trust contributed to the initial buildings. Okay, so just to start off, these are your standard Rhodes University graduates. After graduation, they engage in acts such as these, sometimes enjoyable. Apologies to the Calvinists amongst us, but they do this before they get married. That creates the incentive for at least one of the parties to propose marriage, and when they do get married, usually a year or two later, and assuming they have established a reasonable career, they then expect children. And that is followed by the birth of the child, who now has to grow up in this country, integrate, be part of the so-called New South Africa, and then go out, do the same thing his parents have done, and get into the workforce or into management, where he has to comply with labour laws and manage them. Sometimes they would witness this kind of thing, as well as marches, which can be very entertaining. By the way, on average, a statistic that we aren't aware of is that the quality of toy-toying has reduced dramatically since '94. Students today can't dance, and I'm trying to introduce a program certainly at Rhodes to get them to do it properly. This is unfortunately a lot of the reality of today in South Africa. Lots of unemployed people. And of course we have political parties.
They aren't unemployed, they're advertising their wares and I employ them often.
We have political parties. Here's a particularly popular one, with hopefully its new member. We've got some really interested politicians, and I think on a philosophical basis, after we've gone through that and had children and kind of retired a little bit, we understand that the importance of time, and that every day lost where we haven't danced at least once is a waste of time. And shortly thereafter, we danced. And then with any great luck, before we suffer too much, we die. So that's kind of part of the cycle of life, according to me. But that is not what today's talk is about, although it relates to it somewhat. It is to do with the state versus Standard Bank, the end of FICA as we experience it. My particular experiences with FICA have been negative, largely, and with Standard Bank in particular. I'm not sure if it is bigger, better, or faster, but certainly bigger than most. But this is not unique to Standard Bank. The issues around FICA are to do with all of the banks, all the commercial banks, and they all apply this draconian legislation and or policy, and I'll come to that just now, in various forms. So, what prompted this talk was partly Leon, who wrote in Business Day, that crossing out of his name was not my fault. It was Leon who wrote for Business Day. A really great article exposing the anomalies of FICA and saying quite correctly that the purpose of FICA is to combat money laundering activities and the financing of terrorist and related activities. It performs virtually no such function, but is used instead to turn unwilling businesses into government agents for the invasion of privacy. Extremely well put. Thank you. More recently, Marlies van der Westhuizen of Norton Rose Fulbright has said there are several civil court judgments against banks that froze customers' accounts. The emphasis is on civil. This is people spending lots of money to go to civil court in the hope of achieving something. And then, more particularly, she says, unless a bank is entitled to freeze a customer's bank account in terms of its contract with the customer, the bank has to be given an intervention order or some similar order by the FIC in order to have legal grounds in which to do this. So, the issue that I have with FICA is that it creates not only inconvenience, but largely suffering as well. And the real cost of FICA compliance is actually in the human value and the negative value that it imposes on society. And these are three cases. The third one is my own, but this is what has prompted me to do something. The first was Deborah W. She asked for her surname not to be mentioned, for fear of whatever. This was a relatively young single mother, a child who, on payday, Friday, a particular month, had her bank account frozen by, at the time, Nedbank. And she came to my office. She was distraught. They had lost all of her documentation, which is typical. Banks generally have a fire every 5 years, I don't know why.
Yeah.
And they lose documentation. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 months prior, her handbag had been stolen, including her driver's license, ID documentation as well, and was unable to show an original identity document or some other proof of identity. The bank simply said your bank account is frozen until these documents are available. She was left unable to feed a child or to pay her rent the next day. I intervened on her behalf. I phoned at the time Tom Boardman, who was the CEO of Nedbank, and although I didn't speak to him directly, I spoke to his personal assistant to advise that I would be depositing this lady and her child on his doorstep in Bryanston for the weekend, because they were now his responsibility, since the bank under his direction had created this harm for them. Fortunately, 20 minutes later, the account was unfrozen. She went on and life carried on. I don't know what's happened since. The case of Colonel Botha is a senior policeman in the South African Police Service. Exactly the same thing happened. The bank account frozen, funds appropriated from the account, ostensibly because of documentation that he had not supplied. In his case, highly inconvenient. A lot of harm was done because his debit orders the following week for his motor car, washing machine appliances bounced by the bank. West Bank at that stage in particular reported him to or listed him as a errant creditor, and he now has a listing at the credit authorities. Took him several months to try and unravel that, all because he had no access to his money for several weeks, and this is a policeman, senior one in our police force. However, my lucky break came a few months ago. I have a trust, or I'm a trustee of a trust, more accurately, called the Howard Rourke Trust, very original. By the way, the John Galt Trust is a name that's been unfortunately taken for many years.
Who is John Galt?
He's a guy who led that revolution.
So, about 20 years ago, the trust was established, and in June of this year, without any notice, the account was frozen. I contacted the bank. They said they had no documentation on the account, despite the fact that documentation was required to open it. The account was frozen. I gave them some time to sort it out, which they did not do. Fortunately, at that stage, there were 3 senior executives of Standard Bank in Grahamstown during the National Arts Festival. Standard Bank is a major sponsor. And I telephoned them again to say that I would be effecting a citizen's arrest. By the way, I just subsequently discovered you don't handcuff people anymore, you cable tie them.
Yep.
These electrical cable ties. Apparently much better. So I was going to arrest them, cable tie them, take them to the police station. I had no doubt that they would have been released within at least 10 minutes, but sufficient time for me to photograph the incident and put it on Facebook, which I believe would have gone viral. Regrettably, again, within 20 minutes, they then lifted the freeze on the account. So, what happened subsequently is 7 weeks later, nochal, as they say in Greek, Standard Bank does exactly the same thing. And here is my note to them, and it shows you, and this is where, fortunately for me, the case arose. This is an exact copy from the internet of the account. It says funds not available, the actual balance is 0, the available balance is 0. So in fact, the available balance, which is 0, is one thing, but the actual balance was 0 as well. In other words, funds had been appropriated from the account into wherever. I wrote to them and I put them on terms, suggesting that they need to be, they redeposit the unlawfully appropriate funds by close of business on the 18th of August. They didn't do that. So, this was their response to my threats. In no particular order, I found it particularly, in fact, impossible to get the governor of the Reserve Bank, or the previous governor, Jill Marcus. There's not a single picture of her laughing. Somebody told me it's because of the particular dress style that she wears, which is kaftanesque. But anyway, that was the response. They just ignored it, and that prompted me into action. So, what are our options? What are our options as civil society? Well, we can spend the approximate, and those were previous quotes that I averaged, the 2 million rand on obtaining civil proceedings, judgments, etc., which really mean nothing at the end of the day. They're usually opposed, they're delayed, there's obfuscation, there's all sorts of technicalities. Or you can attend a Libertarian seminar, like we are doing. After you spend 2 million rand, which some Libertarians or quasi-Libertarians have done, they get a lot of applause and told what good people they are. Or what a lot of us do normally is that they tell whoever wants to listen, not listed, or how crappy the banks are. But this is the issue around civil proceedings. And please, a request to all of our legal practitioners in the room not to stand up and put their arms up and go, objection, because I have missed a fundamental legal point. This is as the layperson like me experiences the legal system. And here's a typical example where Joe Bloggs has not paid 250,000 rands worth of goods on credit, goes into the civil proceedings 18 months later after pleadings, discovery, affidavits, etc. Other than the fact that his case hasn't been heard, the claim has eroded by 11% because of inflation. Applications tend to be heard in court, it's postponed. The start of the proceedings, the judge rules that the transaction has occurred in another province. Jurisdictional issue, refers the matter. 6 months later, the matter is then heard and then postponed again because somebody's sick, or the judge didn't wake up and write on time, or they didn't allocate sufficient time to hear the matter. The matter is then heard, and judgment is reserved. You know, I'm not a great cook. The only thing I can make is reservations, but in this case, reserved means that you'll get it when he feels like it or she feels like giving it to you. So, 4 months later, if you're lucky, the respondent, Joe Bloggs, had argued successfully that it was his company who bought the goods, not him. And the technicality wins. Justice and Jane Doe lose. The result is that Jane Doe is denied justice. She loses her money and probably 50% or more and a huge amount of time.
And has to pay costs.
And has to pay costs. And for the legal fraternity is delighted. They have jurisprudence and case law and fees. Jane Doe no longer has anything. So, what about a return to civil activism? There is a case on the moment, with the Free Market Foundation where, and I have great admiration and respect for what they're doing, and have been prompting the FMF to do this for years, to become more activist, to actually take the government to court. This is based on a single word, may. And it says basically that in these closed shop agreements that the minister has to or must enforce and impose it on the other. What's it? The
non-parties.
Non-parties. And all they want to do is change the word to may. In other words, there's a discretion rather than obligation. And that is going to take a long time and has created huge ruckus and probably will eventuate in millions being spent.
3.5 million so far.
3.5 million rand to change a single word.
Wow.
So think back to the days of the late Niels Dittmer, who single-handedly probably brought down the agricultural control boards and did wonderful things like selling fresh meat out of his truck in the middle of Randburg without a permit. Or Dave Fisher, who I met many, many years ago, who got a bill from the receiver of revenue, now called SARS at the time, and took a whole truckload of chickens and dumped them at SARS in Port Elizabeth. Live. And got them to sign the receipt. They left him alone after that. And of course there was Don Caldwell, Brownswell, the TGIFs, I call them, Teresa Gale and Francis, with their wonderful work in the early 90s. And of course Julius Maleme does a great job with sort of activism and using very cheap, effective methods to get things done. So this is what I did. I watched the movie Pulp Fiction again. Quentin Tarantino is the master of the macabre, but there's a particular part in Pulp Fiction which is of particular interest, and that is where these two hoodlums have inadvertently shot the head off of their victim and messed up the car that they were supposed to deliver. There's blood and brains and gore everywhere, and they panic, but they phone the fixer. And the fixer instructs them very simply, do this, take the car to so-and-so, have it cleaned, have it polished, then deposit it there, put the body into a bag, dump it into a river. It's a sort of a checklist of things to do. And I believe that in South Africa we need fixers. We need actually to have a bachelor's degree at least, if not a postgraduate program in fixing. People who know how the system works and who can get around it to get things done. So after that, I prepared the prima facie evidence of what the appropriation. I drove to the police station. It cost me 4.76 in fuel. I made absolutely certain that I had interviewed several people at the police station to find an officer who was skilled in taking the statement and the complaint. And I did find one with 25 years experience and commercial experience as well. I had been to the National Prosecuting Authority, found a prosecutor. They all loved the idea because, of course, all of them had been featured negatively in the past. So by fixing it, we managed to get the complaint in, a case number issued within a few hours, and the matter referred to the NPA in Grahamstown, who took a decision to authorize an investigation. Section 205 subpoena has been issued to Standard Bank, who have cooperated and handed over records even without the subpoena, simply because the lady who works at Standard Bank, who was delivered, had been featured negatively before. So where it stands at the moment is the investigation has been completed. There's a prima facie case to be answered for the theft of funds out of the trust account. They were returned some weeks later, but according to the prosecutor, it doesn't matter. You can't steal something and then give it back a few weeks later and no longer be guilty of theft as a result. So, what we have, however, is some challenges. And this is where I'm appealing to the people in this room, certainly the people. The National Prosecuting Authority, by their own admission, and certainly in Grahamstown, has experience with relatively limited cases. They do murder, rape, robbery. This becomes a commercial matter. It is to do with a piece of legislation. They don't quite feel comfortable with it. They've never encountered this before. So I've asked them, would they be open to legal fundies, advocates, attorneys, just helping them along with their case. They said, yes, please, it would be fantastic. Often that happens. but only in high-profile cases, if you're hospital stories, etc. They're aware of the importance of the case and the implications. They understand that if there is a successful criminal, not a civil, a successful criminal prosecution, this could make a difference to the lives of many millions of people who experience what I and others before me have with this kind of legislation. Standard Bank has, by the way, admitted that what they do is unlawful, but it is their policy.
That's called a confession.
This is exactly why we need the legal views. I said to them, look, if it would be possible to wipe out a few of our parliamentarians, I'd like to do that because that's my policy, but it's not entirely lawful. So this is what I've been told is real law. This is the real guts of it. This is where people who previously cannot pay their rent, have had accounts frozen, have had credit report ratings, etc. This is where they are able to, this is where they're able to rise up and do something. This is about civil society. So there's a call here today for assistance from legal fundies or people involved for getting involved in this matter. Yeah, that's it. It's a case and a call. I'll give it to you now. And just a quick thank you firstly to the Orania Beweging for the wonderful venue and for hosting our 30th anniversary seminar. To all you participants and the legal fundies who will please assist. And of course Harry, my little boy in Grahamstown, who couldn't be here today. And this is actually his time. We're supposed to be flying some model planes around this weekend and building something on Minecraft and the computer game. So it's his time which he has donated for me to do. So thank you very much for your attention.
I'm afraid you'll have to ask your questions to Ron over tea. It's tea time now.
Just a very quick request, because if I may, are there any people here, or if you would just allow 2 minutes of your tea time to be infringed upon, would there be any people here who could assist in this case going forward?
Sure. What I would like you to do though is do a character newspaper ad, get about 5 or 6 other people, start a class action, and have them charge for 50,000 charges.
Yeah. I'd get good publicity.
There are a couple of people who help.
So the law responds to questions.
Good. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you.